Hi friends, I'm Olga Koelsch and welcome back to my studio. I'm a big fan of White Lotus series. I really like it. I enjoyed it very much and I felt inspired to record a tutorial about painting White Lotus. Let's do it together. For painting White Lotus, we will need white color. The problem is in watercolor, we do not really have white color, and the most white parts will be just our paper, and we are going to paint shades. And for painting shades, we are mixing some nice gray color. I suggest to mix cadmium orange with ultramarine blue. It's very nice pearly shade of gray. Another trick, you could use any of your old palettes and just mix something in there. Usually it works the best. But let's start from scratch and create a nice mix from cadmium orange and ultramarine blue. Make it diluted. I use big brush, relatively big brush, number 10. And before we start to paint, let's imagine a line in the middle of our paper. Up the line there will be the backside petals, and below the line there will be front petals. And let's start to paint from the backside petals. With the tip of the brush, I start to paint tip of the petal, and then I dry my brush with a paper towel and distribute with almost dry brush. I distribute the paint down. My paper has a little bit of texture in it, and my brush is dry, and that creates this nice, very organic texture on the paper. And let's paint another petal. Same principle with diluted mix, with diluted gray. You start to paint the tip, then you remove the excess water with the help of paper towel, and then you distribute the paint down the imaginary center. Remember about our middle line, so try not to break that line, go over that line. And let's paint something around another petal. You could vary a little bit amount of dark color proportions, light color proportions, but the principle is the same. You paint the tip of the petal and then you bring it with dry brush to the middle. Remember about the shape of lotus. And important thing that first we could see the petals very flat, and while they're getting to the side, all petals getting a little bit more tilted, and that's how a little bit narrowed. So reduce, make petals a little bit narrow, one by one. Once you move aside from the center, you make them slightly more tilted. It's a very fun technique, try it out. And it's perfect for painting white, delicate flowers when you need to show a lot of white areas around. The more diluted your mix, the lighter the petals are. Let's add a few petals aside. You see, I hardly use paints. I set some drop, I set up some direction, and then I paint with dry brush. I have my paper towel right with me, so I could always remove the excess water. Usually I recommend you to use brushes with a nice tip, but for this technique you could paint in principle with any brushes, not very soft. You could borrow nice brushes from kids. They usually are very fluffy and great for this technique. So we are done with the backside petals. Now we are going to paint the front petals. And that's very nice that we have some white areas in here. We could, for variety, add a hint of cadmium orange to our gray mix to make it a little bit warmer. Same principle of painting petals. What I would like to explain you before, try to avoid being too symmetrical. Do not set up another front petal right underneath this one. Also do not set up petals right opposite this intersected area. It usually looks too ornamental, not natural, I would say. Let's first find the bottom and the center of the lotus. You could paint a drop, set some drop, and let's start painting the same technique but upside down. So I set the bottom area, and with the dry brush I distribute paints, and that's how I shape a petal. You could, right now, you could take another smaller brush or just another brush, prepare a darker mix of the same colors, cadmium orange and ultramarine blue. Test it on a piece of paper, a little bit too dark, a little bit too gray, a little bit too yellow. Yeah, it's kind of nice. And while the paper is still wet, it's already not, but it's fine. You could paint over. You could start to add shades right into the petals. So let's do that again. We have a lot of petals to practice. Same principle, but we are painting now from the bottom to top. Set some diluted color, paint some diluted color, remove the excess water, and with a dry brush you shape the petal. You shape the petal, and with the other brush you could add a little bit of shades to the bottom. I like to paint in everything in one layer, max in two, because it helps to reach this spontaneous feeling. And it's nice. Right now we could help a little bit our petals and shape the tops of the petals. So front petals, they need a little bit more of attention, a little bit more of time, but that's how it is. So next petal, bottom area. I think I need a little bit more intense color. Bottom area. Dry your brush. You could even flatten it a little bit and drag out the color, add a drop of dark color into the very, very bottom. Again, dry your brush, drag out that color, and shape the tip of the petal. Just with some outlines, and again distributing a little bit of colors down from the tip. The front area might seem a little bit more tricky, but it's also nice and fun to paint. If you paint it with acrylic or gouache, you know this technique with dry brush, and it works perfect with watercolor as well when you paint some textures. So that's very nice to try it out. Flatten your brush and add some texture, some dried texture. Map out the tip of the petal. Very gentle, very gentle. I'm checking through the camera how it looks. I think it looks very lovely. Let's add a few more petals. The more you go aside, the more you go down, the deeper and darker could be colors in the shady parts. Dry your brush, then shape the petal. If you have some intersected areas, that's completely fine. Or you could paint alone, or you could just paint it over, for example like this. And paint another petal in between, which is also very, very natural, because lotus, it has a lot of overlapping areas in kind of checkered order. So let's show that. Few more petals aside. That would be nice. You could already see where could be a nice petal to set up. You could help a little bit with your brush. Set the wet area, dry your brush, distribute colors, and add some shades. Always do not leave colors like this. Flatten your brush and distribute a little bit, distribute a little bit, not a lot. Create the texture, emphasize the tips. You could paint with brush strokes in both directions, but usually it works better when it's just in one. And I think that could be just the last petal. Try to add some curviness to it. And shades. We imagine that sun shines from the left side. That means right side has a lot of shades. It should be darker than the left side, and shades are deeper. So you could paint this last petal with relatively dark mix. Dry your brush and create some texture around. Now it looks almost perfect, almost done, but let's paint nice middle. It's usually yellowish orange. I just take our cadmium orange, maybe soften it a little bit with our gray tone, and I find a nice spot in between front leaves where I could set this yellow middle with some very gentle small brush strokes. I paint the yellow middle, orange middle, and that's enough. Now let's add a little bit more of contrast to some places. And for this purpose we need again our fluffy brush, and we need to mix again. Would be nice if you prepare really a lot of mix, so you would not need to stop in the process and mix again and try to paint something matching. Yeah, that's fine. Now let's add some shades, more deeper shades for our lotus. First of all, we really would like to emphasize the middle. That's why we need to add more contrast around this front petal. I'm very careful here. And I paint from bottom to top. About this, but you could immediately see how these extra shades, they really adds to the volume of the flower, of the bud. The more contrast you add in between leaves, in between petals, the more volume it will have, of course, at the end. But try to follow the same technique with dry brush, and then it will look very natural. You could, if that a little bit easier to explain, you could outline the area and then drag out the shades up. And the last one, I add shades only on the right side because of sunshine. As I said, sun shines from the left side in my case, and that's why there is a lot of shades on here. I switched to my small brush, to a tiny brush. I would like to outline a little bit some petals. Add just a few details, for example, a little bit of shades in the front petal, in the bottom part, so it will look more organic here. But I always try to follow my technique with dry brush, even when I paint final details, final touches. Some final outlines. And let's add some water to the bottom. I'm watering the you see I have some grayish color on my brush, but that's all right. I'm just watering the area a little bit under my lotus. I will use the same mix of cadmium orange and ultramarine blue, but I will take a little bit more proportion of blue, of ultramarine blue, and I will add some water, or let's say some reflection of our lotus. I don't do anything special about it. I just let watercolor distributes by itself. You could lift your painting a little bit more, so it will just flow down. If paper gets dry, you could soften the edges of this dark water area. As a final touch, final touch, I promise, I would like to add a little bit dark shade to our middle part and emphasize it a little bit. And our white lotus is ready. Thank you so much for painting with me. I hope you liked this technique with dry brush strokes, and I encourage you to try it out on different flowers and write me in the comments which flower you would like to paint next, and see you next time. Bye bye.